Jackie, it's really lovely to be invited into your home and to come and sit and chat to you about a talent that you very recently discovered you had during the pandemic. So, can we start right at the beginning and talk about how the pandemic had an impact on your life, first of all, that led to this discovery of a new talent?
It wasn't so much, well, it was the pandemic, but at the very beginning, when we knew we had to be at home, the church started to send out mailings every day. And those mailings have been a lifeline, haven't they?
Yeah.
They really have. They've kept us going. And back at the beginning, I have it here, Pat Hemsley wrote on March the 25th, 2020, let's do something to use this time that we have to stay at home. We know we've got another 6 weeks when we won't be able to go out. So let's do something that we can bring back to church to celebrate the positives of the time at home. And one of her suggestions was maybe we could write a poem or learn a poem by heart. And I thought I could have a go at that. I love words, anything to do with books, words, I love it. So over the course of a week I thought, how can I do this? And all the time I was thinking, it is hard, we're stuck at home, we can't do anything, we can't see anybody, but it is still a beautiful world out there. And that line, it's a beautiful world, actually inspired the poem Remember. So, and the last line of that poem was, remember, it is still a beautiful world. And I sent the poem in and Pat Hope Jones published it. And then about a fortnight later I wrote another one, because by then we were on our own. And I wrote one about solitude, beginning a time to think, a time to pray, a time to face up to adversity. And Pat published that one as well. And it's gone on from there.
Yeah.
Sometimes just a word will make me think I could write a poem about that.
And had you ever written any poetry
Never.
before?
I'd never written a poem in my life. I wasn't even really interested in poems. I've never had a love of poetry. We all learnt at school, and I bet we can all recite a few lines from when we were about 5.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've never remembered a whole poem since and never bothered about them.
But I bet you can remember the lines of your poems, some of your poems,
Some
maybe
of them.
not all of them. Maybe this would be a good time to pause and maybe you'd like to read that first poem?
Yes?
Yeah?
Yes.
We'll
So
have-
this is the first poem that I tried writing back in March 2020. Looking back, it isn't actually a poem. I think we should call it a sonnet. Remember. Stay strong in this time of confusion. Remember, there is hope for the future. We can achieve, we can survive, we can overcome the challenges of these changing times. We have our faith, we have hope, we have our love for one another. Remember, it is still a beautiful world.
Jackie did your 2 books of poems, of which I'm the proud owner of both, thank you, are called Pictures and Poems Through Lockdown. And the pandemic and lockdown really had a massive effect on everybody I know, but because you've had to shield because of health problems, it had a great impact on you. Suddenly you were confined to the house and the garden. That was your world. Just tell us something about the poems you suddenly felt the urge to write, the odd word that would inspire you here and there, and how you dealt with being in lockdown.
I think a lot of the time the poems actually helped me get through lockdown. When you know that you can't go out, that it's not safe to see people, you actually wonder, what can you do? What's the point of getting up in the morning? And you have to make a reason. And then you look out of the window and perhaps see a butterfly or hear the birds. And suddenly, over this last year, we've actually seen the world in a totally different way. We used to see it and take it for granted. And all of a sudden we were looking and seeing the colours of nature, actually seeing them. We could hear the sounds of nature and appreciate it. All of a sudden there wasn't any other noise. So while I think that I didn't see any of the effects of the pandemic, I was, because there wasn't any traffic noise. There were no planes going over. And you were suddenly aware of the wonderful world of nature all around us. But then, as time went by, 6 weeks, and you think, I'm actually halfway through shielding, we've only got to do it for 12 weeks. But then the thought of another 6 weeks was just, it was almost soul destroying. And you think, I've appreciated everything, I've enjoyed it, I know what's there, I can't do this anymore, I want to go out, I want to see people, I want to see my family. I missed seeing my boys. And at that point there was one of the services that was live streamed. Pat Hemsley had for her sermon Voices, and that inspired another poem, because it just struck me at a time of complete despair. So this poem, Voices, was one that I wrote after hearing Pat Hemsley's sermon about voices. And at this time I was almost in a depression. It was just so difficult knowing how to carry on. So, voices. Voices in my head, voices in my ear, telling me news I did not want to hear. News of worry that does not say, when will this virus really go away? Voices of hope, voices of love, help strengthen my faith in God above. Help me, Lord, to stay strong, to believe all will be well before so very long.
Jackie, I'm jolly sure that everybody is going to be very interested as to what is the process for writing your books of poems. How do you set about writing your poems? Do you have a set routine, or is it all a bit ad hoc?
It's very ad hoc. Sometimes a poem will almost write itself. I can think of something, sit down with a pen and paper and write, and it will be there in 10 minutes. But another time it can take me days. And the very first one that I wrote actually took me the best part of 3 weeks. I had the idea, and at the time I was having treatment at the hospital, which meant I had to go every day for intravenous medication, treatment for a lung condition. And I would think of the poem and have a line in my head as I was going up there. And when I got to the waiting room, I'd think, write that down. And I'd get my pen out, sit down, and think, I've forgotten what I thought, can't remember. And then I'd come home, and on the way home I'd be thinking, and I'd think another line, and actually that's better than the first one. I'll write that down when I get indoors. And I'd come indoors, sit down with my pen, and I'd forgotten it again. So if I don't write it down when I'm thinking of it, it's lost. I have to start all over again. But eventually it does get written. But that first poem took me the best part of 3 weeks, because I kept forgetting what I wanted to say. But then another day I'll sit down and, like I say, I'll write something and it just flows. It depends really on subject and how I'm feeling at the time. And I do need to be on my own.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I can't do it if Graham's in the house.
Yes, you don't need any distraction at all.
None at all. No.
And you have said to me previously, when I asked, oh, who do you show your poems to? What was your answer?
Nobody. Nobody sees them. The only time they've been seen is if they go to one of the daily mailings for church, or if somebody has read them in a book. I've never read one to Graham or anybody else at all.
Is there a reason for that?
When I first started, they were private. They were my thoughts on how I felt. And I just didn't think anybody else would be interested in them. And even when they went out in the daily mailings and people were saying to me, oh, I loved your poem, I thought, oh, they're just being kind. They didn't really. Who would like something that I've written? But for me, they were cathartic. They helped me to cope with everything that the whole world was going through. And if I could write it down, I could cope with it.
And did you know a formula for writing poetry?
No. No, I still don't know if there's a formula, but I know if it doesn't sound right. And when I'm writing, I've got one here that I started, I wrote this one a few days ago, and you can see I write a line, then I write another line and scribble it out because I've read it and it doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And then I'll think of another bit and think that will be a perfect ending. So I write it down, but then I have to do an arrow to make sure it goes at the end and not in the middle.
Yes, I know. So this is your notebook, or one of several notebooks.
This is
your scribble
third
book.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And do you know for sure when a poem is complete?
Yes.
Yeah.
If I can get to that last line and read it through, I know if it sounds as if I've finished.
Yes.
There are a couple that I'm not happy with.
Right, and we'll go on to talk about that in the next little video slot.
Yeah.
So Jackie, you touched on the fact that there's a couple of poems that you're still not happy with, but they've still ended up in your 2 books of poems. So just briefly tell us what it is about those poems you haven't loved. You're still not happy with them.
Do you know, I really can't tell you what I don't like about them. They just don't sound right. They don't feel right. But I kept them because I'd written them. And then finally, in August last year, we were able to go and see our family again. And we had great plans. The weather had been fantastic. And we made these wonderful plans that we would all meet in Greenwich Park, because one son lived next to Greenwich Park, the other son lives in Dartford, so he would drive over and meet us there, and the 6 of us could all get together and have a picnic in the park. And then it rained.
Oh, Jackie.
So our oldest son said, don't worry, come to our house and we'll have a picnic in the garden. And if it rains, you can go and sit indoors, Mum, you'll be fine. So we set to and got in the car, drove down. We got 10 miles from their house and we got a puncture. So we pulled over to the side of the road and this Land Rover pulled in front of us and reversed back. We were convinced we were going to be mugged, attacked, whatever. And this young lad jumped out of the Land Rover and he said, you got a puncture, love, I'll help you sort it out. And he changed our tyre for us with no idea who any of us were. And this young boy was just so kind.
An angel.
Oh, he was like a good Samaritan.
Yes.
And I actually said, he said, "Are you going far?" And I said, "Oh, I'm on my way to see my sons and daughter-in-laws. We've not seen them for 9 months. And we're supposed to be having a picnic lunch with them." And he changed the tyre for us, and then he put his arms around me and he said, "There you are, love. Go and see your sons now." Well, that was it. I was in floods of tears.
I'm almost in floods of tears. And did that give you some inspiration
It
for
did.
a poem?
It did. I knew I'd have to write a poem about seeing the boys again and the girls,
Yeah.
but I had to get this young lad into it as well. So he's the middle verse of my last poem of the book. And of course we got to Dartford, told the boys all about it. I must say though, before then, this young lad gave me a hug. I was in tears because we could get on our way, and I was still thinking, "You mustn't touch me, it's not safe."
Yes, yeah.
And how silly is that?
Wow,
But
not really.
we got there and we saw the boys, and of course I cried again. And then I told them about my poems, and Tony said, "You could send them to me, Mum, and I'll do something with them." And I said, "Well, I've been taking photos as well." And you could see the resignation on his face as he said, "Send me them as well. I'll do something with them." So I sent all of the pictures and all of the poems that I'd written and taken through lockdown.
Yes.
And because they were pictures and poems taken through a lockdown, there was the title for the book.
There, yes. Pictures and poems through lockdown. Well, I think we ought to cut and have a reading of that reunion poem with that lovely chap who changed your tyre in that middle verse.
And a tissue.
And a tissue. Get your tissues ready, everybody.
Poem Reunion is the one that I wrote after we saw the family for the first time, and after we'd had such an amazing experience on the side of the motorway with the young traveller lad, Jordan, who changed our tyre for us. He just had to be in this poem. It was almost at that moment as if he was another son. He treated me as he would treat his mother. So, reunion. I've seen my boys, I've seen my girls. What joy has filled my heart. It's been so many months that we were kept apart. A punctured tyre delayed us 10 miles from journey's end. The young lad who stopped to help us showed the kindness of a friend. And then at last we saw them, that family we loved so well. Those few hours we spent together, more precious than words can tell.
Jackie, I'm sure so many people will have had their tissues out listening to that last poem. It was just so moving, and the lovely story of the Good Samaritan in the middle there, absolutely wonderful. So I've got to ask you the question, are you going to carry on writing poetry?
I never planned to carry on. Reunion was going to be the last one. It was in the book, and that was it. I didn't need to do any more. But then I missed it. And when we went back to church in September and heard the sermon on forgiveness, it just inspired another poem. And the following week the sermon was about fairness and inspired another one. And to be honest, these poems are a gift from God. We've had so much taken away from us, but we've also had an awful lot given to us. We've been given time to think, time to be aware, time to actually care about everybody else. And it would be an awful waste of this gift not to do it and not to carry on. So I'm not sure about a title for another book. Pictures and poems after lockdown don't sound quite the same. But yes, I will carry on.
Well, I'm sure lots of people will be absolutely delighted. And copies of your first 2 books of poetry are still available, aren't they? And I gather you've got a compilation of both books 1 and 2 now are in one complete works.
But I think this is my son's very subtle way of saying he's done enough. He's called this one. This was a surprise gift for me. And it just arrived in the post and I opened it and cried.
Oh.
But it's actually called All of the Pictures and Poems Through Lockdown. And I think it's his way of saying that he doesn't want to do another book for me.
He doesn't want to print another book for you. This is it. But
yes.
I know that you have got a stock of these books still available, haven't you?
I have, yes. And if I can sell any of them, all of the money is going to St Botolph's Church. They have done so much for us over the past months that I feel that I want to give something back.
That's wonderful,
And
Jackie.
it's just a little thank you for all of their support.
Well, we've got to thank you, Jackie, because these poems have helped so many people through the pandemic, not just yourself, but they have reached out to other people and helped others too. So thank you.
Oh, you are very, very welcome.
And so we must end on one final poem. And which one have you chosen?
I've chosen Captain Tom. Captain Tom was an inspiration to the world. He gave everything to help the National Health Service. I can't do that, but I would love to be able to give so much more to St Botolph's for all of the help and support that they've given to me. Without the church, I don't think I would have got through this last year. They've done so much. Captain Tom was another one that I knew the last line before I knew the rest of the poem. And I think it's relevant to everybody in the world that the last line is, you will never walk alone. And with God on our side, we will never walk alone.
Thank you, Jackie. We'll cut away there and we'll just get you nice and comfortable in your chair so that you can read that wonderful poem with that beautiful last line to us all.
Thank you. Captain Tom. Captain Tom, you amazed the world when you walked so many miles. You inspired us all with your thumbs up and all those ready smiles. You met the Queen, she called you Sir. You sang with Michael Ball. So many achievements in this past year, you have inspired us all. But now you've taken your final walk to a place that is not fully known. But be assured, wherever you are, you will never walk alone.